We're live, dude. We're live.
Is Kev watching?
Probably. We're live.
Oh, hello.
Do a little intro.
So are we actually live?
I think so.
You dorks are live. Go.
Oh, we were waiting for our great producer from Outsports, Sid, to give us a signal. He does not do a good job at directing. He's a hell of a writer, though, let me tell you. So, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending where you are watching. I guess if you're watching somewhere in the Pacific, it might be morning. But here in the East Coast, it's 7 p.m. And myself and my dear friend here, Derek Schell, are here to talk about the NCAA men's basketball tournament. I have been told that I will have to speak about the women's tournament. I'm going to let Derek handle that for about 3 minutes later on, since everyone knows that UConn is probably going to win, but we can still discuss a little bit, I guess. Right?
Yeah.
So looking at the tournament, we kind of figured that there's so much to talk about. Obviously, and you know, we did a little piece for Outsports earlier this week where we talked about why March is the best sports month of the year, and I think it really is. I mean, just last night there were a couple games watching the Manhattan Jaspers play against Hampton, and it's one of those out bracket games, but it still makes it a lot of fun. So March is certainly a lot of fun, and over the next 3 weeks. Derek and I are going to provide some insight. I don't know how much insight I actually have, but I like to talk. So I can say some things. We're actually both heading to the Syracuse region next week on the men's side and the East to catch a couple games there. And we're also both going to the Final Four. So we'll be around a lot of the action. Of course, Derek is going to the women's Final Four out in Tampa. And we're both going to the women's regionals in Albany. Assuming that UConn can beat St. Francis of which St. Francis they play?
St. Francis, Brooklyn.
St. Francis, Brooklyn, not St. Francis of Pennsylvania. Assuming that they can beat them in stores on Saturday, but I think that's a safe bet, right?
Yes. So I will be both at the men's Final Four for 2 nights and then the women's Final Four in Tampa.
And Sid has said anyone who wants to come hang out with us and use this hashtag OutMadness, he's going to buy drinks at the bars in Indianapolis on SB Nation and Outsports. So feel free to tweet at us and come say hello.
Yes, and you can tweet during the show as well.
And you can tweet during this wonderful show of ours that we're doing, yes.
Hashtag OutMadness.
OutMadness, kind of a play on words since it is March Madness and we're both out, so kind of makes a lot of sense with that, right?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Let's get into it.
Is anyone tweeting at us yet, by the way?
I can't log into this Twitter because I don't know your thing.
Hoops.
Just keep talking, I'll figure it out.
Well, I can't give you my password because everyone will go in there and try to hack my
So,
account.
in the meantime, we had some lighting issues,
Okay.
we had some other technical difficulties, but we are still having...
So what we're going to do is we're going to break down the tournament in each region and give a dark horse, a dark horse, the game, and then give our Sweet 16 picks. And at the end, we can hopefully... pick our Final Four. So, without further ado, let's go to the Midwest region, where, of course, sits the Kentucky Wildcats. And I don't know, I'm pretty safe to say now, I don't see anyone beating them.
None?
None.
You have them going all the way?
All the way. All the way to start the show. Coach Cal and the Wildcats.
It doesn't bother you at all that they had like 4 overtime games this season?
None.
In the SEC?
Nope.
Which sucks?
It's tournament time. It's tournament time. I think Kentucky just is too big, too strong. They have their guards are studs. Willie Cauley-Stein, probably the #1 pick in the draft, and I just don't see them losing to anybody. I do love the possibility of them playing Wisconsin because of the contrasting styles somewhere down the road here. But I think we're looking at that possible Kentucky-Duke matchup, which for the NCAA will probably be the biggest, most heralded game, I would say, since Bird and Magic in '79. I don't think it'll be a bigger and more hype with social media and everything else that there will for for Calipari and Krzyzewski. Yes, Calipari and Krzyzewski. Duke Nation versus the Wildcat Nation, and I think it'll be a hell of a final if that comes out. But I would like to see them play Wisconsin. But I regress.
Yeah, let's head into the Midwest and look at what do you think you start off your best game is, best matchup.
I think the best matchup there in that region is Wichita State and Kansas. I think Wichita State obviously first round game.
They play Indiana first round.
I'm sorry, Wichita State, Indiana.
Yeah.
It's been a long day.
It's okay.
Or 2 days. So Wichita State, Indiana. Obviously Indiana comes out of the Big Ten, tremendous conference this year with Michigan State, with Wisconsin. Wichita State allows its opponents 55.8 points a game. That's one of the best defensive efforts in the country. 18 and 19 games down the stretch that they've won. Indiana with the great guard, of course, and Yogi Ferrell. I think that's going to be a really good game. I think Indiana didn't finish up strong. They didn't have a great year, but I think that being in the Big Ten, they're still pretty good. So I look for that to be the best game of the Midwest.
Who do you think is going to take that one?
I think it's going to be a toss-up. I like Indiana. And we watched Indiana a couple weeks ago. Remember we watched that game where we were joking about they just were not good?
Right.
But they were good. They got that game to overtime versus Michigan State. I think Indiana is going to be good. I think they're going to win that game. I think that at the end, when you get a team like that plays in that conference against such great teams day in and day out, Wichita State is not the Wichita State that they've been over the last couple of years, or they've just been completely dominant. I think that Indiana State's a couple points better than them.
Yeah, I agree with you. But I do think the best matchup for me would be Butler and Texas. I think Butler, they don't have the same head coach, maybe not the same players that they did before, but they've been there and they've shown, in the past that no matter what their seed, they're going to come out and just play. They don't care if people are going to pick them to win. And they do have a couple guys on their team currently, upperclassmen, who did play in those big games a couple years ago. And then Texas is just very interesting to me on the other side of it because this is a team that came in to the season, preseason ranked top 10. They obviously fell off the wagon a little bit, but they were arguably in the best conference in the nation, in the Big 12. They lost a lot of close games. They had a lot of seniors and key players that had a lot of injuries for them and were out a couple games in the middle of the year. That kind of made them stumble. But they are playing well, and they are probably second to Kentucky, one of the biggest teams in the conference, or in the tournament, just in terms of size and athleticism. So I see that being a really interesting game with experience versus the new young guys who were preseason ranked pretty high.
And I think sometimes when we talk about all this coaching out there, I think that Texas with the coaching, Rick Barnes has been there forever. Even before Texas, when he was way back when at Providence years ago, he's coached 1 million tournament games. One of the best coaches in the tournament. So I don't necessarily disagree with there. I think Texas is pretty low seed, so that'd be a good one.
My good friend Ryan Daffhorn tweeted at me already and thinks the Boilermakers are going to pull the upset of his alma mater second round and beat the Kentucky Wildcats.
What is a Boilermaker anyway? Isn't that a drink? Some kind of Boilermaker? Isn't that a drink of some sort?
I guess so, but I think he's got a stretch there. Purdue hasn't done much. I have him winning one game, Ryan, but not two.
They can win whatever they want, but at the end of the day, you know what's coming on the backside of that. So, and that's not going to be a good one. So, Mr. Daffhorn, the Boilermakers will not be playing in the home state of Indiana for the Final Four. I can assure you of that.
I agree. Let's go to Dark Horse. I'm going to start off with mine. I have possibly two Dark Horses in this region. The first one is the one I talked about in Texas earlier. I think they have a good chance of winning that first game. That second game possible matchup of them versus Notre Dame is highly intriguing to me, mainly because I'm just not a huge Notre Dame fan and I want to see them lose. But I think it'll be a lot different. Notre Dame doesn't have much size. Texas has a ton of it. They do play zone a lot. Notre Dame shoots the ball well, so I'm excited to see maybe who will come out of that. But in terms of the overall region, my dark horses would definitely be Texas. And even though they're ranked pretty high as a 4, Maryland, not a lot of people talk to them as a team that could even give Kentucky a shot, but I think they could. They have a lot of good seniors. Their best player, Wells, is a very tough player that can play multiple positions, and I think they could give them a scare.
Maryland is so interesting, a team that obviously has been one of the staples in the ACC for all those years. And then this year they jump to the Big Ten. They finished second in the Big Ten, which there's not predicted. Mark Turgeon does a great job in that program. I agree. I think they're a dark horse. Obviously, Maryland getting to the Final Four or even getting there, they're not a dark horse because they're Maryland, but they haven't been to Maryland. They've been going back to the Gary Williams days. They're good, and I think that they'll compete. Of course, the problem with a dark horse for us in this region is who's sitting up top. And the bottom of the bracket, I was like, but Kentucky's there. And when you talk about Kentucky being there, I don't think there's any dark horses, at least not into the Final Four. I don't think Kentucky has any problem in the region. I think they're going to run through it, and that'll be it. But I agree. I think that a good dark horse is Maryland Terrapins, the Terrapins.
I think if anyone else has a good game that they think would be a possible interesting matchup, either in the first round or second or third rounds, let us know. I don't see too many surprises in this region.
No.
Not at least in the top half. Obviously, things seem pretty solid. I think we both have Kentucky and Maryland in the Sweet 16. The bottom half is interesting, though, to me because, Wichita State is another team. I mean, last year they were undefeated going into the tournament, and the only reason they lost was a close game to the national runner-up in Kentucky. That's the only reason they probably didn't get to the Sweet 16 or Elite Eight that year. And this year, the only time they were really knocked off was by, another good team in their conference, Northern Iowa, who has an even higher ranking in the tournament than they do. So I think a lot of people are counting them out, and I think they could give Kansas a run for their money in the second round. That's a very interesting in-state matchup right there. Possibly look for in the round of 32.
Yeah, I mean, Kansas, they were interested in the game versus Iowa State. Iowa State's just a hard-working, blue-collar team. The way they play is awesome. I mean, I think they definitely could lose that game, but I agree. I think Kentucky's going to, obviously, as we've said 12 times already, which we'll stop talking about them in a minute. They're going to 100% be there. I like Maryland. I love Notre Dame. I watched Notre Dame play earlier this season up at Mohegan Sun at the Hall of Fame event, and 2 games, and they're good, man. The way they play is great. We got a local kid here in New York who we actually lost to this year, who's heading down there to play. 6'7" kid, shoots the lights out from 22 feet, and he's going to fit into that program perfect. So I kind of followed them a little bit this year. They're good. They're good all the way around. I think they could be a team, depending on how they're shooting the ball, that can give Kentucky a little bit of a run for their money. But I like Notre Dame.
Your fourth one?
And my fourth one is Kansas. I just think as good as they are, Big 12 is still a great conference. They were up on Iowa State that whole game until Iowa State made the run late. They're still Kansas. They're a solid team. They're good as always. Will they get out of that bracket? Probably not, but I do see them advancing to the Sweet 16. So no surprise in the Midwest. 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Nice.
Did you say 1, 2, 3, and 4?
I didn't. I was a little different. My only difference is I have Texas pulling that upset. I always like to pick one pretty much long shot every year. And this one's one that people just stopped. They pretty much they have counted Texas out. They said, they're done. They barely snuck into the tournament only because of the first half of their season. But a lot of times that's motivation for teams to do well going into the tournament. So I have the same Kentucky, Maryland, but just Texas and Kansas in that region.
Texas and Kansas. All right.
Yep.
We will see.
We'll see. That'll be an interesting one.
Yeah. So on to the next region.
Let's head to the West.
The West. We'll head out west. Where's the regions being played in the West? I don't even know. LA, San Diego, somewhere warm. In New York, they're calling for 6 inches of snow here again this weekend, supposedly. So anywhere warm is nice for us.
Yeah. So we'll get right into it. I mean, in terms of best game, my best game here is I'm looking at UNC and Harvard. The people overlook the Ivy League every single year, regardless of what year it is. My best friend from college played in the Ivy League, and he's one of the best basketball players I've ever seen or played with. They just don't think the smart guys can play. And Harvard proved that last year. Couple upsets. They snuck in this year, beating Yale in that Ivy League championship, 1-game playoff. And UNC is another team that's been so inconsistent this year. They've pulled off some great wins in the ACC, obviously getting all the way to the championship of the ACC tournament. But ultimately, those contrasting styles, I think, will prove to be pretty interesting. And I think that game's going to be a lot closer than people think. I still have North Carolina winning it, but I don't see that being a blowout by any standards. I think they're going to make it a close one.
I don't. I think that over the last couple of years, Tommy Amaker's done an unbelievable job at Harvard. Great athletes. They've been one of the better teams in the Northeast, but I don't think it's that team this year. I think they're still very good. They're very good out of the Ivy. They had a war with the way the tournament broke down, that Ivy League. They had a war down in Philly with Yale, but they're good. They're not playing with Carolina. Carolina is actually playing really good basketball, which I'll talk about in a minute. But my one for that is this Xavier Ole Miss game. There's a lot of questions about this Big East. How good is the Big East? And living in New York, we get to hear about the Big East all the time, of course. And I just don't think the Big East is that strong. We'll get to Villanova in a minute, but the Big East this year was not as strong as you would think. St. John's gets into the tournament. They just weren't that good of a team either, And a lot of parity, I think, is the right word. Amongst themselves, they're pretty good. But I just don't see that good. So I think Ole Miss, out of the SEC, is a better team than Xavier. I do. I think Ole Miss is going to beat them. I think you got a battle of a couple really good players. Stephen Moody from Xavier is 26 points in the last game. 5 3-pointers this game, whenever it was. I think last night to win it. And that's for Ole Miss rather. So they're solid, and I think there's something to be said about winning a game in this out first four or whatever it's called. Because, I know a couple of years ago as a coach, we had a situation. We lost the first-round playoff game. A team played an out-bracket game the day before. They got their feet wet. They got the jitters out. And I think that can catch you in a game where you're actually somewhat even with someone. And I think Ole Miss and Xavier are. The kid Stainbrook, the big from Xavier, 12 points, 7 rebounds a game, is a solid big. But I think it's going to be a good game. I think that's a good one to watch when they play tomorrow. And I like Ole Miss. I just don't think the Big East is going to fare super well in this tournament. I like Providence a little bit. Talk about that later. But I like Ole Miss, and I look for that to be a really good game.
Yeah, I think there's something to say about getting on the court, using the balls, seeing the arena. I think that's also an advantage. I would agree with you there. Who do you got as your dark horse?
I don't know if you ever call North Carolina a dark horse, but nobody is picking them to win this thing. Not many teams are picking them to get to the Final Four because Wisconsin is sitting up there, and then you got Arizona at the bottom of the bracket. Both teams have been dominant all year. But I like Carolina. I think that they got hot at the right time. They get to the ACC tournament championship. I think something has to be said to that when you have UVA in there and Duke, and neither of them get there. And, of course, UNC absolutely manhandled Virginia, who's been playing so well all year. But I think Carolina can make a little bit of a run here. If they get hot, continue to play well, the backside's that Wisconsin game in the Sweet 16, which would be unbelievable. But I like the Tar Heels to have a nice chance to advance in this thing, and I think in their bracket they're good enough, and the parity's good enough amongst the top teams for them to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I think this bracket or this regional for me is probably the most interesting. Obviously, I'm biased. I love this regional or this little area because Wisconsin's in it. Obviously, I'm from Wisconsin. I'm a Midwest guy. Love the Badgers, and I love the draw they got. None of the other teams look. There's not like a sexy pick to me other than Wisconsin to win this. If I had to choose a dark horse, just someone no one's really talking about, I don't think, is Baylor. Again, I go back to the Big 12. I think all year consistently the Big 12 is shown to be the best conference in basketball right now. With the top half, I mean, there's 5 or 6 ranked teams in the top half.
And I would argue, ACC.
Those two,
Duke,
those two
Notre
are the
Dame,
best.
Virginia, Carolina,
Those are the
NC
two
State,
best conferences.
Pretty
I
good
agree.
for you.
I think those two are the best conferences. That's your dark horse was from the ACC, mine is from the Big 12. I think Ole Miss will win that first game, and I think Baylor will play them in the second round. And I think Baylor has a chance to beat them. I mean, not really much of a dark horse to say a 3 is making it to the Sweet 16, but just someone that no one's talking about. Again, they have deep tournament experience. They have a lot of strong players inside, and I think that will take them far in the tournament this year. And then my final 4 picks are very, very boring. I think they're going to be great, phenomenal games, but Wisconsin, UNC, Baylor, and Arizona.
The Baylor Bears. The Baylor Bears.
The Baylor Bears. I think a lot of people are choosing that for this region. Not a lot of other teams are looking that strong right now. But that's why they play the games. Hopefully it'll turn out something different. But just rooting for my Badgers at this point. Who do you got in the Sweet 16 that region?
Wisconsin's getting there very good. So is Carolina. I like Ole Miss. I just think that the way their bracket played out, that's going to be one of those upset teams that kind of sneaks in there. And Arizona's just been dominant all year. We don't get to see them as much because they're playing those games 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock out here. But, from all the research and all the reading, they're a very, very, very solid team. So I think that's a good one. Obviously, Derek rooting for people from Wisconsin. He came to New York for the first time about a year ago, and he saw a stoplight for the first time, so it was very exciting for him. But he still loves his Wisconsin.
I'm from Milwaukee, not the farm.
I don't know where. I never heard of it. Milwaukee.
Okay.
So anyway, on to the South region. South region. Of course. Who's in the South? That's Duke. Yeah. Derek is a Duke groupie. He roots for the Blue Devils, not the Saunders Blue Devils. But a lot of my gear he would love because it's the same colors. But obviously Duke's sitting there very good. They didn't do what they needed to do in the ACC tournament, but still certainly a favorite to get there. Just as always, loaded, tons of great players. But and I like them to win the bracket. But the best game in that bracket, SMU and UCLA. A lot of people feel UCLA shouldn't have gotten in to the tournament, and they did. And of course, SMU comes out of the American Conference, which we just know is not that strong. Outside of UConn being in there, SMU, a couple other teams, but not what a lot of those teams once played against. But the X factor, of course, the legendary Larry Brown sitting there leading that team. And an interesting contrast in that game. UCLA gives up 68 points a game. They got a kid that averaged 16.4, but 68 points a game is a lot of points to give up. The flip side of that, SMU defensively averages, their opponents average 59.8 a game. So you got your contrast there, defense and offense. One team really good defensively, the other team not so good defensively. And Nick Moore, 14.2 points a game, great three-point shooter. I like SMU. I think people aren't going to give him a shot. I think all these people see their bracket and they see UCLA. So listen, don't pick your bracket because Bill Walton played there 100 years ago. Or, of course, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar before him. Do not pick your bracket because of that. It's not going to happen. UCLA squeaked in here. They had the name, and that's why they got in. Probably not going to advance very far. Stick with Coach Brown and SMU. I think they're going to advance.
I agree with you. I mean, UCLA is a team that, albeit they were playing Kentucky, but had 7 points at halftime when they were playing Kentucky. They do not deserve to be in this tournament at all. Not sure how they squeaked in, but I agree with you. I have SMU on that one. SMU won a relatively competitive tournament with the AAC championship. But my best matchup, I would say, would go down a little further in that regional and go to Iowa-Davidson. Davidson's a team that won the regular season A10 title. Didn't win the tournament, but a team that, again, Steph Curry leaves and no one talks about him. The A10 is a very good conference. People don't realize it's not really talked about that often. But I think it's a team that they've shown a lot of heart and a team that could give Iowa real trouble. That 10-7 game is always something that no one really talks about. It's always kind of up in the air. Same with that 8-9. Just whatever you look at, sometimes people just choose a name. Iowa's a team that consistently loses close games, and obviously that worries some people. They're very inconsistent. They win games in the Big Ten they shouldn't, and then they play Wisconsin and lose by 40. Just some games they're there, some days they're not. But I do have faith that they're going to squeak this one out, and Iowa will be beating Davidson. What about your dark horse for this region?
Dark horse. Oh, this is the best dark horse of all of them.
Drum roll.
Drum roll. Eastern Washington.
What?
The Eastern Washington Eagles. The Eastern Washington Eagles. The only thing I know about Washington pretty much is that Connor Mertens is from there, and that's because all Sid does is write about him. So that's kind of all I know. Connor Mertens, is he anywhere near Eastern Washington?
I
don't know where he is.
Somewhere out there.
All I know is Portland and, Eastern Washington. But the Eastern Washington Eagles, 26-8, and who are they playing on? Of course, the Hoyas of Georgetown. And everyone knows that Georgetown Hoyas do not win big games. They haven't won a big game since years ago when they went to the Final Four. I don't know where that was. I was there. A little up and under move, and it was a travel. But that's another story to get to the Final Four. But 26-8. Big. 6'4", 6'4", 6'4", 6'7", 6'8", with the point guard averaging 22.9, the big averaging 16.6. Georgetown is young. 2 members of the team that were on that all-rookie team for the Big East, the old Big East as we call it. But even so, I like Eastern Washington. I think Eastern Washington, where is Eastern Washington? Find me. Oh, yeah. And then if they get by Georgetown, you have Utah, which is not a super strong team, and of course the other one everyone always loves, like Stephen F. Austin. Gus Johnson yells and screams about them every tournament. You get to hear him say, Stephen F. Austin, first ever tournament win a couple years ago. So I think that they're dark horse. I think Eastern Washington could be that little team that kind of squeaks in, that Florida Gulf Coast team from a couple years ago that everyone falls in love with. And, of course, eventually they would have to meet Duke if that happened, and that would be all she wrote with that. But they could be the team that everyone falls in love with.
You're going to feel dumb when they lose in the first round. It's definitely not going to be Eastern Washington. It will definitely be, again, not much of a dark horse. I know the seeding, but a team that I have, making it all the way to the Elite Eight would be Iowa State. It's a team that, like Anthony said before, they've pulled comebacks, whether it was out of the Big 12 or inside the Big 12, from down 15, 20 points. Now, hopefully, if a team gets them down 20 points in the NCAA tournament, they don't let them come back in the game. But they have the ability to do that. They have players that can score, in a variety of ways. Their best player inside Niang can play 1 through 5. He's very versatile. They have a ton of shooters, and Morris is a great point guard. So I have them going all the way through the Elite Eight and actually upsetting Gonzaga. And that game in that region is another one that I'm looking at down the road. If they both get there, Iowa State Gonzaga would be just tremendous to see. I mean, Iowa State doesn't have the size to handle Gonzaga inside, but Iowa State has had a way tougher regular season schedule, and I'm wondering if because they've kind of endured that schedule, that they'd be able to beat Gonzaga. The couple times that Gonzaga's actually played a very, very top-tier team this year, they have lost. So I'm interested to see how they kind of bounce back. And from an upset last year where they were supposed to be going to the at least the Elite Eight last year, and then got upset. A lot of people just count them out because of their conference, but I think at this point, they have a senior in Kevin Pangos, Gary Bell Jr. I think they could really do some stuff because this is their last shot at, I think, a really solid team. They have Kyle Wilcher, the transfer from Kentucky now. They have all the pieces to do it, so that game is marked on my schedule. Hopefully those two will duke it out for a spot in the Elite Eight.
Gonzaga is another one of those teams. Like, if you're an East Coast person and not a basketball junkie, it's tough to see them, but Pangos is a hell of a player. And they got a couple of them there. And this might be a little personal, knowing how good of a coach he is. Davidson is an interesting pick for me. They got dismantled in that game by VCU. There's VCU, right?
Yeah.
And in the A-10 tournament, which of course is not that strong of a conference either, but Bob McKillop can coach, man. That guy is one of the best coaches in the entire country, and I think he's underrated. It would be interesting to me if they get by Iowa, and that's a Gonzaga and Davidson matchup. If Davidson has the horses, their first year in the A-10, they win the regular season, their first year in the conference. If they can pull an upset over Gonzaga, I don't think so. I think Gonzaga is really strong to make a run. A lot of people think they're a Final Four team this year for the first time, finally. So it'll be interesting to see. But I think you could have a nice little game there. I really do. Could be a good one.
Yeah, that whole region is pretty interesting to me. There's a ton of teams that no one really talks about that often. I mean, you don't hear anything of UAB right now until they made the tournament. Again, like you said, Eastern Washington you haven't heard of until now. A lot of people are saying, was it Stephen F. Austin is going to pull that first round upset against Utah. People are counting St. John's out because their center's now out for a couple weeks, and obviously that would make him out for the rest of the year. San Diego State, again, that's another one of those West Coast teams that no one talks about because we don't get to see them play out here if you are from the East Coast. So a lot of teams that no one talks about. That's good for my Blue Devils. I think they've gotten upset in the last couple of years in games that they should not have lost. The last year losing to, was it Mercer or someone?
Duke?
Yeah.
Mercer.
Yeah, Mercer. And then 2 years before that, losing to Lehigh. They're not going to do that this year. Their team is too strong. They have a combination of, upperclassmen leadership, Emil Jefferson, Quinn Cook, and then just the dynamite freshman class. Obviously, the ACC Player of the Year and maybe possibly up for National Player of the Year in Jahlil Okafor. And Tyus Jones is probably my favorite player in college basketball right now. I have them obviously easily going to the Sweet 16, along with Utah is a little bit of a surpriser for some people. I just think people are counting them out, so I have them going to the Elite Eight against Duke. And then at the bottom, really looking forward to that Gonzaga-Iowa State matchup. What do you got in your
Gonzaga,
Sweet 16?
State. Well, Sweet 16 from that region. Let's see. Who do I have? Obviously Duke, I agree. I mean, Okafor is just they're very good. I would love to see a Kentucky matchup on that that Monday night would just be awesome. I think Okafor versus Willie Cauley-Stein and Towns would just be an absolute war. So we'll see. I think I definitely think Duke gets there. I'm going to go with Eastern Washington going to the Sweet 16. I'm going to stick with my convictions, and we're going to see how far they can go. The Eastern Washington Eagles. Okay. Iowa State. Once again, gritty, tough kids, down in every game they play, it seems like, and then they kind of make that run late. Can't do that all the time. It'll catch up with you, but I think they'll be okay here. Local flavor there. Yonkers native, Dustin Hogue, tremendous for them. One of their top players to watch. One of the best athletes I've ever coached against. One of my favorite stories. He was suspended for a half against us. We were up 3 at halftime. We won 3 games that year, and he came out at halftime and had, I think, 20 points and 18 rebounds. That was in the second half. So just a sick athlete. So kind of root for him. Like to see the Yonkers kids do well, certainly. I like Iowa State, and I like Gonzaga. I think Gonzaga is, Mark Few is one of the best coaches in the business. Same things. Team's always prepared. His kids are always prepared. He's going to probably have these guys rolling and hopefully going to take care of business with that. I don't know what you're doing, but that's a different charger, so it's not going to work.
Oh, okay. My computer's going to die.
So, yeah, computer's not going to die. You got plenty of battery.
Well, it's going down pretty fast.
It's half.
Anyways.
Nervous Nelly.
Yeah, so that's who we have for that region. Last one, let's head to the East, which will be
the East,
where we're going to be. We're going to be able to watch those games. So
we have a question.
We do. Oh, let's go to it. Wait, where did it go?
As you can see, we're very excited about this. So this is a big thing for us.
Okay, our question came from C. Banning, and he said, which Big 12 team can go the furthest besides K-State, obviously?
Besides K-State. K-State.
I think that was a little joke. I think he might attend K-State University.
Canceled, lack of interest, K-State basketball this year.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so I think we both would like to talk about a team in the next region that might help answer that question.
There's a couple teams.
There's a couple teams, but we'll go through them. Obviously, I'm a big fan of the Big 12. I've been talking about it. I have Texas going far, Iowa State, Baylor. So I guess I didn't even realize how big of a fan I am of the Big 12. But the next team that we'll talk about, I think we'll just start with dark horses then and talk about them for the East region, is Oklahoma. I don't know why. I like their path to get to possibly the Elite Eight. Their first round game, Albany had that little bit of magic in their conference final, but they're not doing anything. And I think they'll beat Providence. And then that goes to that matchup against maybe Virginia, maybe Michigan State. Who knows who's going to come out of that. But I see an Oklahoma-Virginia game to get to the Elite Eight. That would be very exciting. They have guards that are can flat out score. I think they're one of their main guards is Player of the Year in the Big 12, Heidel. And they were one bucket away from making it to winning the championship of the Big 12 tournament. I think they're definitely my dark horse in this region. I just like the way they play. I love their coach. They have had those comeback wins like we talked about. And again, just to wrap up the Big 12 in general, their strength of schedule is up there because they were tested every single night, and they came away with a really deserving 3 seed. So I'm hoping for them and for my bracket that they make to the Elite Eight.
Oklahoma, they're good. They're definitely good. Another Westchester kid, a local kid, a couple of years back, Isaiah Cousins. Yeah, Isaiah Cousins won the Mr. Basketball Award here in Westchester from the Lower Hudson Basketball Coaches Association, and they're big, strong, and tough too. I don't disagree. I could see them. Well, we'll talk about that in a minute, but I could see them coming out of that bracket. They are pretty good. The dark horse that I like is going back to this Big East conference, and that's Providence. They won the Big East last year. They were in the mix this year. Very solid, great guard play. Dunn's one of the best guards in the entire country. And Cooley's got it rolling up there in Providence. I've never been to Providence, but little city kind of south of Boston. But man, they love their Friars up there. It's the only show in town. When you pull into town, they have Friartown billboards all over 95, and really do a great job of supporting. So I think they got it going on, and I think they got a nice chance to advance. I think they're a dark horse that I like.
Absolutely.
Oh, can you go back to the bracket? We'll get to him in a minute. They're going to attack Oklahoma. We can't. That's a second round matchup or Sweet 16.
Oklahoma Providence round of 32, but
yeah, that's is it really round? Yeah, that's an unbelievable second round matchup on. I don't know what day that is. It's Saturday or Sunday, but that's a game you want to watch. I like Providence. I think that could be an absolute war, and Providence can beat Oklahoma hands down. There's no question about that. So I love that as a game. I think Providence has a chance to advance a little bit.
I agree with you. What about, I think in this region more than anything, there's a ton of first round or round of 64 games to watch. Which one do you like the best?
NC State, LSU. You kind of look at these games, the 8-9 games, the 8-9 games of what's going on, and both teams. Obviously, NC State is coming out of the ACC, and LSU's coming out of the SEC, which Kentucky completely dominated, and both teams are kind of erratic, and you don't know what you're getting out of both of them. So I think that's going to be a good game for that reason. NC State won at North Carolina at Louisville, so LSU beat Arkansas. I think you're going to have a good college basketball matchup, a typical 8-9 game there. I think it's a toss-up game, and who's going to win.
Those two teams for me are the definite. You hit it right on the head. Erratic. LSU had a shot to send it into overtime against Kentucky at home, and NC State not only beat Duke handily once this year, but also lost to Duke by about 35 or 40 in the ACC tournament. I just don't know what I'm going to get out of this matchup. That's why this one's a hard one to pick. I actually have NC State winning it, but my biggest first round matchup would definitely be the one right under that, Northern Iowa, and Wyoming. I've heard every analyst on TV saying that Northern Iowa is a team that people are not talking about, and they should be. And I agree with them. The couple times that I've seen them, they beat Wichita State, won their conference tournament, upset a lot of teams that that they didn't think they were going to win, and they held that ranking all year long. You know, a lot of people don't give the credit to these mid-major conferences, and that goes across not only Division I, but that always happens. You know, those teams that are mid-level that, you know, no one really talks about, especially going into the NCAA tournament, it's just because people don't watch them. They don't know that their skill. And they make a good point. I mean, a lot of people leave early to go to the NBA, and then these teams that have guys that, you know, weren't at that level, but they've been playing together now for 3-4 years. They have an advantage, especially in these pressure situations in the NCAA tournament. I like that game. I think it's going to be an interesting matchup. Ultimately, I have Northern Iowa moving on. But I think that one will be a really good game in the round of 64.
Sweet 16 from the region. I like NC State. Oh, my God, NC State.
What?
There's Villanova. All the Villanova fans going to go crazy, and there's some people tweeting, well, they were this against the ACC, they were this against that. I just don't think they're that. I don't think they're that solid team. I think the Big East, as I said earlier, had a ton of parity, and I think if you're looking for upsets, that's the one. And now it's an 8, or what is it? 8? It's an 8. An 8 beating a 1, yeah, it's an upset. But it's NC State beating Villanova. It's not that great of an upset. I know. Just reading today, some people think they're going to lose in the first round or the second round. Other people have them going to the Final Four, and that's what makes March fun. Obviously, you know, seeing what's going on here, but. You know, my heart is not with Villanova. I just don't think they're that strong of a team. I think Jay Wright does a tremendous job with them every year. I just think being in the Big East is a little bit of parity right now, as I said 4 times. And I just don't think they're going to go that far. So we're going to go NC State, little upset pick there. Louisville's going to get there, not playing great basketball. Not playing great basketball. But they're in that interesting spot. You know, they're still better than Northern Iowa. I know everyone's talking about Northern Iowa. They're better than Louisville's better than them. Louisville has a nice way to get to the Sweet 16. And if somehow or another Villanova does go down, you're talking about Louisville with somewhat of an easy path to get to Elite 8. So I like Louisville. Oklahoma, as we said earlier, you know, another team loaded up. Lon Kruger does a great job with them as well. Big, strong guards, play physical. They're going to get there. And, of course, UVA. Coach Tony Bennett, a favorite for Coach of the Year, him and Coach Cal, what they've done at Virginia the last couple of years. Same thing, coming out of the bottom half of that bracket. So I like NC State, you know, the Wolfpack, Louisville, the Sooners out of Oklahoma, and the Cavaliers out of Virginia going on to the Sweet 16 next week.
Yeah, that's a tough. I think this is the toughest region to pick the Elite 8 or the Sweet 16 out of, I think. Ultimately, I do have Villanova in my Sweet 16 only because I had a friend that went to Villanova, and she's really cool, and I don't know, I just don't feel like giving up on them. Because everyone's talking about them like they're not good. They're good.
They're good, no question.
They've only lost a couple games, and I think people just think the Big East is irrelevant at this point, but the Big East is still pretty tough. And I have them playing Northern Iowa. I think Louisville is not the same team they were before all that.
Louisville, not Louisville.
Whatever.
Louisville. You made fun of me for saying Wisconsin today.
Okay.
It's Louisville.
Okay. Well, anyways, those two teams, Louisville is not the same team that they were before all that stuff happened with your boy. He gave them something else on the perimeter that they no longer have. Yes, they have a beast inside, and Montrezl Harrell is ridiculously good, but ultimately this team is not the Louisville teams we've seen 2 or 3 years ago that won a national championship. They don't have that senior leadership. I see Northern Iowa winning that game. So I have those two in the top half, and then obviously, you know, my dark horse making it to the Sweet 16 in Oklahoma. I really want to see them play Virginia. I'm hoping Michigan State kind of slows down and stops playing so well that they have. You know, they took Wisconsin to overtime to win the Big Ten tournament. I really like that game. You know, Virginia, Michigan State, both very good defensive teams. You know, studs inside, Brandon Dawson. But I think Virginia moves on, so I got Virginia, Oklahoma, Northern Iowa, and Villanova.
And that's our region. That's the region that we're going to go up and see. Go back to the bracket. That's the region we're going to go back to. Some of those. That's the region we would go see. And you know, anytime you go to one of these things, you like to have a good fan base there. It kind of makes the atmosphere fun, of course. So if it's Villanova, not far from Philly to Syracuse, you know, 3 or 4 hours. Providence is a small school, but Oklahoma should draw pretty well. I'd love to see Isaiah Cousins play up there. You know, Virginia's going to draw very well too, and then the Louisville fans always draw. So if that's how it plays out, that could be a nice, fun region to go to. So before we give our Final Four picks and our championship picks, we're going to put Derek on the spot here. Okay, since we are doing this for Outsports, for a gay website, we're going to have to ask this. I'm not going to answer this, but we're going to ask Derek. Who is the most attractive player in the NCAA tournament this year? I know Jim Basinski and Sid are sitting there somewhere listening to this, smiling. Right, Sid? You could talk. I know you're probably smiling as I say this because that's what you guys do. So who in the NCAA tournament this year do you think is the most attractive player?
Oh, you had to let me know. I had to do my reach. I have been in love with Kevin Pangos since he started at Gonzaga. I'm not digging the long hair, but he wears my number 4, and he can shoot 3-pointers. I really do like him. He's a stud. Yeah.
There you go, Kevin Pangos. If you could tweet at DShell4, right?
And I have a thing for guys named Kevin, apparently. But.
That is true, too. At DShell4, Kevin Pangos, tweet up Derek Schell, say what's up. Give him a dap if you see him somewhere down the road here. Is Gonzaga in that region that we're going to?
No, that's another thing. I kind of also, even though I picked Iowa State to beat Gonzaga, I do want to see redemption, and I want to see Duke and Gonzaga play because I think that would be a phenomenal game. Gonzaga has all the pieces, and so does Duke. So I think, seeing Okafor go inside with that big foreign guy inside. What is his last name? I don't know. He's huge. He's like 7'2", like 360, this dude in the middle. So I think that would be an interesting matchup. But, yeah, if I was had to put on the spot, I would definitely say Kevin Pangos.
We have one question here, too. We have another question. How far will our biggest fan, Rashid Johnson, and the Johnnies go? As you know, people know, at least if you read Outsports, Rashid Johnson had some homophobic verbiage on Twitter a couple months back. The bottom line is St. John's, without Opadeka, is just in trouble. And they're losing a key player like that inside is just going to be brutal for them.
Even if they win.
And if they do win, sitting there is Duke. I mean, if they can get by, in an 8-9 game, San Diego State, who's no slouch, it's a tough situation, I think, for St. John's to be in. And you got a couple of these New York teams in here. Manhattan had a tough loss last night to Hampton. It was brutal watching that game. St. John's in the same situation. Who else from New York is in? Is that it? Those two this year? St. Francis of Brooklyn, are they in? No, Robert Morris beat them. So not a lot of New York representation here this year. And, of course, we have our Knicks, who St. John's might be better than as well. So not good for the NCAA tournament for New York this year. But we always have next year. Maybe the Fordham Rams will hire a new coach that can win some games. We'll see.
I got a question via Twitter, but I don't know if it's old or new, about thoughts on Iowa State. I briefly went over it before. Just my thoughts on Iowa State. I have them going to the Elite Eight. I have them upsetting Gonzaga. The reason Iowa State scares me is because they don't blow teams out that they should. They always have close games, whether it's an average team in the Big 12 or the best team in the Big 12. They've really just been really inconsistent. One of the guys I used to play basketball against in high school, Matt Thomas, is a sharpshooter for them from Wisconsin. But they can beat anyone, but they can also lose to anyone. They're not a team like Kentucky that you can circle for sure. There's no way they're losing that game. I don't know. From UAB all the way down to the last game I have them winning, I don't really know what I'm going to get from them, but I trust in Fred Hoiberg to get them ready for the tournament, and for Niang to show and kind of prove that he was preseason first-team All-American.
So now, of course, before we give our final 4 picks that everyone has been sitting, all 12 people that are probably watching this, have been patiently waiting for, we're going to switch gears and go over to the women's tournament for a couple of minutes. Now, obviously, when we talk about the women's tournament, the interest as far as the men's with TV coverage is not the same. However, I will say this. A couple weeks ago, I went up and watched one of the semifinal game of the American, the American tournament there that UConn was in. Let me tell you something. It's really awesome to watch UConn work up close and see how the precision and the intensity that they play with and the way they do things. As a basketball coach, to watch up close is just absolutely awesome. We all know how good they are. But I'm looking forward to going to the regionals to see them play. I think going up to Albany, and they draw so well and it's such a great atmosphere, it's basically going to be a home game. Who are they going to play? I don't know. Cal, Kentucky, those kind of teams are going to draw people. Louisville? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to going up there and watching UConn play, against some better competition, hopefully, at that point. I don't think it's going to really matter. I just think they're a well-oiled machine. Gino's as best as anyone in the business. I think they're probably going to run through the tournament. But anytime you get there, there's nothing like college basketball. There's nothing like the fan base, the bands, the cheerleaders, the way people get into the games. So being in these situations and watching it is awesome. There's nothing better than that. So
I agree. I'm just going to go over some brief thoughts I have about the tournament. I mean, a little closer to women's basketball, given my situation, and that I am very close with someone who works for the team. But ultimately, I mean, I'm going to pick UConn to win. I feel like that wasn't obvious.
Go on a limb.
But there will be some interesting games. I mean, UConn might make another matchup. I mean, Kentucky women keep getting stuck in their regional, which I'm sure they hate. They got a 2 seed this year, which was great for them. But I don't think that they keep liking that they're getting put in UConn's regional. I think Kentucky and Louisville, right? Louisville. In that region will be the best to give them maybe a shot of a close game. Kentucky's got some big girls inside that could do some things and some experienced guards, but ultimately UConn's too much and they're making it to the Final Four. I can almost guarantee that right now. It's interesting. The other region, below that, the Spokane region, is the teams that would match up with UConn in the Final Four if it were to get to that point. And the 1 and 2 on that side are Maryland and Tennessee. Now, Maryland is a team that went undefeated in the Big Ten. That's pretty impressive, but the Big Ten women for the women's side is not what it is for the men's side and is pretty weak. Top to bottom, not a lot of ranked teams in the nation, not a lot of strength. Their biggest challenge was probably Ohio State or Iowa, and they handled them pretty well. So I have Maryland going far. Right under them is probably the most interesting talk of the tournament is Princeton Women. I don't care what you say, going 30-0 is pretty dang impressive. I don't care who you're playing. And a lot of times it's tough. A lot of times it's tough for those teams because they can't control their strength of schedule. They try to get good out of conference games, and they tried to get a couple. But it seems like the committee didn't really reward that, and they kind of, you didn't lose a game and you're an 8 seed. That's kind of rough. It's the best in their team's history, though, and they have to play a tough, hard-nosed team from Green Bay. I have Green Bay actually winning that game. I think they're going to play Maryland. But at the bottom of the region, Tennessee really, stands out to me. Tennessee's storied program, not the same as they've used to been, and I had them going to the Final Four until their starting center, Isabel Harrison, got hurt. She retore her ACL in her knee, and I just don't think they can do it. And if they do get to the Final Four, I mean, they're meeting Connecticut, and I think that would be great for women's basketball if they play again. Brings back the best rivalry in women's sports, which would be really cool to see. But either way, I think either one of those teams is not happy to be on that side. And then Duke in that region also, provides some interest, but again, they're having a down year as well. The other side, going into the Oklahoma City region, Notre Dame has a relatively easy pass to the Final Four. They have to play, Minnesota second round could be tough, and then they meet a Stanford team, possibly in the Elite Eight. To go to the Elite Eight, that would be the only team that beat UConn this year. Now everyone looks at it as a fluke, but they still beat them. On their home floor, and Stanford lost a bunch of games and ended up with a 4 seed in the women's tournament. A lot of times, women's tournament, you get a 4 seed, you're pretty much counted out right away. If you're not a top 1 or 2 seed, you're not going to the Final Four. But I think Stanford could give Notre Dame some trouble. If Notre Dame doesn't shoot the ball well, they could lose. But again, they're another team, one of the only ones who's really proven that they can kind of stay with Connecticut. And then the other one in the other two in that region would probably be Baylor and Iowa. Iowa has one of the best players in the nation in Sam Logic. She's from Wisconsin. Triple-double machine.
What was Wisconsin talk during this call? My goodness.
And they would have to play Baylor probably to get to the Elite Eight. Baylor's a team obviously storied as being pretty good. They have a lot of good individual players. Not sure if they can get it all together. They're pretty young to make a run, at someone like Notre Dame. So ultimately, I have Notre Dame going to the Final Four in that region. The last one would be South Carolina. I see their region as the easiest region. Their 2 seed is Florida State. Their 3 seed's Arizona State. Neither team has done anything in women's basketball in a long time. South Carolina is looking to go to their first Final Four in a long time. And they were a 1 seed last year, and they actually got upset in the Sweet 16 by North Carolina. But this year they've shown that they can beat some teams. Obviously, they stumbled when they went to Storrs, Connecticut, but who hasn't? And they're looking to kind of get revenge, and I'm really interested to hopefully see in person that game between South Carolina and Notre Dame, and to hopefully see that in person, and see who wants to play Connecticut in the championship, because ultimately it's going to be Connecticut in the championship in my mind. I hope it's Tennessee playing them. Hopefully it's a Connecticut-Tennessee matchup. Obviously Connecticut winning it. I have Notre Dame beating South Carolina. Notre Dame has the experience. They have one of the top 2 or 3 players in the nation in Jewel Lloyd. She can score in a lot of ways. Jewel is definitely not going to want them to lose again. They've lost to Connecticut now 2 years in a row in the Final Four, in the semifinal and final last year. And it's going to be a Connecticut-Notre Dame rematch in my mind if Notre Dame can handle South Carolina's size. And Gino's going to win his 10th title. Sorry to say it.
10 titles, my goodness.
Well, I'm picking the Terriers from St. Francis, Brooklyn, to upset UConn on 9 o'clock on Saturday night there at Gampole Pavilion. And
You'll be there.
what do you think? Imagine, oh my goodness, up in heaven. That would be unbelievable. Of course, it could be a 160-point game on the flip side, but that's it. So to wrap up, now our final four picks. Final four picks.
Go back.
Final four picks from us, too. I don't know how much we know, but we certainly – that's the quietest I've been, by the way, during that 5-minute stretch in my entire life, maybe.
Ever.
People are sitting back on, what's he doing? They thought I lost my voice. Anyway,
Ever.
Final four. Here we go. UK. I almost said UConn. UK. The Wildcats, of course, marching through their region. I love the Badgers. I love the way they play. I love what Bo Ryan does, his offense. Defensively, they're solid. Just a really, really solid basketball team. So I like Wisconsin. I like the Dukies. You know, Coach K coming into the Final Four again. I think they got the size. They got the solid guards to get in there, and I think they're going to get there. And I like Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma has a 3 seed coming out of that region. I think they got a nice shot to get there. You know, same situation. Some of the best players in the Big 12. Lon Kruger's been coaching for a million years at 3 or 4 different schools. I think they're going to march in there, and that's what I think that we're looking at. So you're looking at that, you know, UK and who? UK is going to play UK, Wisconsin. That's the game. I think that if somebody's going to beat them, I think Wisconsin has a chance. The way they play, the style that they play, the slow down of basketball they play could create a really, really interesting situation for that game. I still think Kentucky wins the game, but it wouldn't surprise me. I'd love to see the contrast. On the other side, of course, Duke and Oklahoma. Same type of thing. Those tough big guards that Oklahoma has. Duke with Okafor inside, who could be the best player in the country. Right? Arguably, he's the other one. Him, Willie Cauley-Stein. Probably going to get in there. You know, you're looking at that Duke and Duke UK final. And what's better than that on Monday night? 2 of the biggest storied programs, 2 of the most popular and winningest coaches. You know, Calipari will get into the Hall of Fame probably this year. They'll probably announce that at the Final Four. Coach K is already in, and the NCAA will be loving it because between social media and everything else. Cal versus Coach K, Cauley-Stein against Okafor, and all the other things you could come up with. You want to say good versus evil. A lot of people say that. And we could have a hell of a game on that Monday night. I really think that. I think Kentucky will pull it out. I like them to win the national championship, but I do like Duke and Kentucky in the final. And, you know, Coach Calipari winning his 2nd championship and continue to do things the way he's doing them down in Lexington.
Just to clear up, I don't know why I said it so awkwardly, but I'm dating someone. My boyfriend Kevin works for the University of Connecticut.
Did he just text you that?
No, I just realized I said that very awkwardly, and everyone knows it already. So that's why I have all this weird inside knowledge of the women's basketball world. And
that's why we're going to the regional, because we get free tickets.
For once in our entire friendship, we completely agree on something.
Oh my God.
To make it completely uninteresting for you guys, I have the same Kentucky, Wisconsin, Duke, Oklahoma. Kentucky's too much for everyone. I mean, right when you wear their first group out, they have 5 more All-Americans coming in. McDonald's All-Americans coming off the bench. That's a scary thought. And they should be safe, pretty safe to get through to the Final Four. On the other side, Oklahoma is kind of both of our dark horses in the tournament. It's more so that we just kind of like their path. Virginia's been stumbling a little bit in terms of having one of their best players out, Anderson with the appendicitis in the thumb. He didn't look too good in their ACC tournament. I don't know if that's going to come back and bite them. And then just beating that Northern Iowa team I have in the Elite Eight, just being too much for them. Obviously, the Duke is an emotional pick, but I think it's also a smart pick that a lot of people are making. They have everything 1 through 5. They have a senior in Quinn Cook who's made, I think, at least 1 3 in every single game they've played this year, and he has like 5 or 6 games where he's had at least 5 or 6 threes. It's pretty impressive. And then, ACC Player of the Year inside. Their X factor is going to be their bench. They're not very deep. They don't bring a lot of guys off the bench, so if they come across a pretty deep or talented team that can wear them out, I don't know if that's going to be trouble for them. But I have them ultimately beating Iowa State to go to the Final Four. Then my boys from Wisconsin, that's the more emotional pick. I'm a little nervous because everyone's picking them, so that makes me a little nervous and makes me think that a team like Arizona sitting there licking their chops because a lot of people don't watch them on the East Coast as well because they're pretty much late night games. This is a team that I'm looking forward to seeing this rematch because Wisconsin and Arizona was arguably one of the best games of the tournament last year. Frank Kaminsky, that was kind of his coming out party, no pun intended, but he had a great game that game, and proved who he was and what kind of player he was going to be. And that got them to the Final Four, and I think it's going to happen again. The committee says that they don't make matchups happen, but that's a hard one to deny. Those two teams are both loaded at every position. They have a defensive stopper. They have a long forward, Nigel Hayes or Brandon Ashley, and inside they have the two big boys to bang. So I think that's going to be an interesting matchup. But I ultimately have my Badgers taking on Kentucky for another rematch, as last year's Final Four game, and Wisconsin was 1 3-pointer away from making the national championship. So looking forward to that rematch, and I literally cannot believe we agree on our Final Four.
Well, what we're going to do here, too, throughout this, we're going to do some stuff for Outsports. After each round, we're going to have a little preview of the next round, so we kind of know what's coming now. We'll do something tonight, and then Saturday morning we'll have something for the second round, and hopefully we could do one of these next week. Maybe next Wednesday we could do one. Yeah. As we go into the Sweet 16 and then the Final Four. We are, like we said, going to the Syracuse Regional in a couple weeks. Or next week we're going to the Final Four, so we'll be out and about at these places. It's a Final Four, actually. We got all kinds of people going. Sid, of course, our Outsports guy, he's going to be in town as well. Derek Gordon, Jason Collins, Wade Davis, a whole bunch of us from the Outsports family will be out in Indy. So hopefully people could stop by and say hi. But keep that hashtag going. Please do not blame me for anything that goes on with these picks. Any complaints, DShell4 on Twitter. I actually have a job, and I'm very busy during the day, so I can't answer people's tweets as the game's going on. I need to keep my teaching career going.
Hey, you guys missed a question. Hey, listen, I have a question for you before you hang up. You guys, the most important. I want to know how Stanford's going to do in the men's tournament.
Stanford?
Yeah, the NIT. They're the 2 seed in the NIT. Come on.
We must have missed that memo.
What is the NIT analysis? Come on, that's what people are really going to focus on.
No offense to yourself, Jason, or Jaron, but Stanford basketball this year has been canceled for lack of interest. So we are moving on.
I already used that joke, Anthony. It doesn't work twice.
I actually use it 4 or 5 times a day, and it usually just works well. So I just keep going with it. That's how that goes. So that's where we're at. So we'll stay with this and see how good we could do. Normally my brackets are gone by Thursday night, so hopefully I could go a little longer this year. We'll see how long we can go with it. And like I said, we'll do some stuff in print for Outsports over the course of the next couple of weeks. Try to get back on here and do another one of these next week, and see. But this was a lot of fun. I had fun with this.
Yeah, this was fun. I think this year, we say it every year, but it's kind of up for grabs. Everyone thinks that there's this one Goliath to take down, but I think that's going to be interesting because everyone's going to try to get to him.
I don't think there's ever, at least not as I can remember, where this kind of a Goliath. Yeah. At least not that I'm trying to think, going back to the Duke teams at Leighton, I was too young, but not like this. This is another level.
Right. I think the conference alignment, though, has made it so the last 3 teams in the Final Four or whatever are pretty much, those are going to be up for grabs. And I think a lot of people are confused about these picks, so, do your best. In terms of us writing another piece or another follow-up, if you have any, questions that you want us to answer or dive into in the tournament, specific matchups, either tweet at us or Sid or at Outsports.
Tweet out, #OutMadness. Sid is very witty with his headlines and his hashtags, apparently. He has found something that he's good at, headlines and hashtags. We'll put that on his tombstone at some point. So, #OutMadness. We'll be tweeting as we watch games throughout the tournament, and we'll see what happens. But this is fun. We'll do another one of these. Enjoy the madness. Like I said, the best time of the year coming up. Sit there and watch damn games all day long from noon till midnight, and you get to see some of the greatest moments ever in sports, right? Second round game or first round game, UCLA, Tyus Edney, full court.
Are you guys going to keep talking, or are you going to end this thing?
We're going to end. We're going to end now, but we like to talk, and it's so much fun. I could do this for like another 4 hours if you want. This was a lot of fun. I had fun with this. We got to do more of these.
We're done. Go UConn.
Go UConn, women, and we'll see you from there. Enjoy the tournament.
Bye, guys.